Dave Bosworth here, coming to you from Sam's Speakeasy on Hennepin Avenue, downtown Minneapolis, where our downtrodden, defeated but undeterred Minnesota Vikings return home to face the Indianapolis Colts. Shane Steichen, Joe Flacco, and the detestable Indianapolis Colts. Can the Vikings return to their winning ways and go to the playoffs? We'll find out.
All right, so as always, we're going to put the big board up, our tribute to the old NFL Today program, pregame show from back in the day. As always, we're going to start with quarterback. We've altered our big board a little bit, but we're going to start with quarterback. We're going to end with intangibles, and we're going to give you our summary and prediction.
Are we going to add officiating crews to the big board? Because we probably should start doing that. Sean Smith will be the lead ref this week. Maybe we need to go over that after intangibles, huh? Just terrible as those guys are.
Quarterback. So we talked about Joe Flacco, or Robert did in his intro. Thanks, Robert. Drew, you want to talk about quarterback? You want to hit the quarterback category for us?
Well, I could see why they're going to sit that Richardson guy, because they have no chance of winning with that guy. So the Flacco thing was expected. Here we go with another crafty veteran. Flacco, say what you want about old Joe Frankenstein, but that guy knows how to win football games. He's no slouch. The Vikings better be ready for him. He's not going to take off and run with the ball like Richardson would. But I think if you had to balance it one way or the other, Flores would rather face Richardson and confuse him than he would Flacco. I think it's a no-brainer move for the Colts. They have to start Joe Flacco to have a chance. And I think they're going to attack it the same way that the Rams did with Stafford and the short drops, the passes to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. You know, they're going to rely heavily on their offensive line, which is one of the best in the NFL. But that being said, I think Darnold's been playing well. You know, 128 rating last week. He had some ghost passes that went to nobody, but still overall, I like Sam Darnold with this offense a little more than Flacco-Stein over there. The Flacco's no joke, though. 7 TDs, 1 pick. He can get it done. He's seen it all, too. Just like we talked about Stafford in that big board, Chris, with the Rams. And sure enough, the Vikings let Stafford just sit back. If they let Flacco do that, they're on the verge of another upset. You can't let that guy do that. So I think he's a good quarterback. I'm going to give Darnold the nod this week. The Vikings get the check mark for quarterback.
Chris?
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with Drew. I think Brian Flores would have loved to see Anthony Richardson out there this week because, you know, the Vikings weren't on. The Red Zone channel was showing a lot of Houston, Indianapolis this last week. That dude is as bad as I have ever seen it. The throw he made at the end of the first half was just inexcusable. And, you know, if he's going to be the future of your team, I don't know how you're going to try to develop this guy or how you're going to work your way around this. But for this week, like Drew said, Joe Flacco has been in the league a long time. He's seen basically everything. He's kind of a statue behind the offensive line, so you're not gonna get a lot of big long runs down the field from him. But you know, if you give him time, he will shred a defense given the opportunity. But the loss against the Rams was not on Sam Darnold.
No.
Sam Darnold, the loss to Detroit wasn't necessarily on Sam Darnold. He played well in both those games. Should have gotten the go-ahead touchdown to Jalen Naylor against the Rams on a throw that he just straight up dropped and would have walked into the end zone on. I think Darnold is the better quarterback in this game, so he's going to get the check mark from me. But it's a whole lot closer than it would have been if it was Anthony Richardson back there instead of Joe Flacco.
I'm going Flacco. You guys talked about his veteran experience. The Vikings defense has been shredded the last 2 weeks by good veteran quarterbacks. I don't think primetime has anything to do with it, but waiting all day for Sunday night sucks for me. The Vikings needed a get-right game, and I thought this would have been a get-right game with Anthony Richardson. The guy's completing under 50% of his passes. Dude said he came out at the end of the third quarter because he was tired. I mean, like, come on, man. Really? 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 Joe Flacco was washed up, and then all of a sudden he shows up at Cleveland and takes the Browns to the playoffs. Joe Flacco was washed up, and now all of a sudden he's got the Colts back to what? They're now 4-4. They're back to 500, and they're back in contention after 8 games when it kind of looked like they were close to going down the tubes at 0-2. You know, it sounds dumb because Joe Flacco is like 57 years old. He should be drawing Social Security checks, but Joe Flacco worries me because this Vikings defense has gone from first in the NFL in EPA on defense per play to 32nd the last 2 weeks. I hope Brian Flores has got the mistakes from the last 2 games cleaned up, but I don't know that he has. We'll see, but I'm taking Flacco in this game. And there's nothing against Sam Darnold. Like you said, Darnold didn't do anything bad to lose the game against Detroit, against the Rams, but he did not outperform Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford. And I don't know that he will outperform Joe Flacco. All
Can see
right,
that.
Chris, running game.
This is a pretty close one. I mean, I still don't know how close to 100% Aaron Jones is. I know he's played pretty well the last couple of weeks given the opportunity. They completely went away from him against the Rams after the first couple drives for reasons that only Kevin O'Connell knows. Not only that, but Jonathan Taylor, now that he's back to being healthy again, that guy's one of the top running backs in the league. And the Colts offensive line is relatively solid, particularly on the interior. So given all that, I think I'm going to have to give my check mark for this one to Indianapolis.
Drew.
This one's extremely close. It could be a push. It would be a push, but everything Chris said about Taylor is accurate. The Colts have a terrible run defense. Terrible. You can run right through them. I think they're ranked 30th in the league. But when you get Taylor in there with that offensive line, and we're going to get to the offensive line here pretty soon, but he can get it done. He averages 90 yards a game. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and he's a guy that can get big chunk yardage, much like Kyron Williams is doing. So just like Kyron Williams last week, he's going to be the point of shutdown for the Vikings and try to make them more one-dimensional. But with the Colts offensive line, I kind of have to give the run game to the Colts, but I think Aaron Jones is going to get his. I don't know how much Darisaw not being out there is going to hurt his run game, but kind of got to give the lean a little tiny bit to the Colts on the run game offense.
Yeah, I am too. When you take the Vikings offensive line injuries into flux and you add Cam Robinson not being as good a run blocker as Christian Darisaw or even David Questenberry if he starts, which probably will happen, throw in Jonathan Taylor. Although, like you said, the Colts are just god-awful at stopping the run. I think the Vikings are going to make money running the ball. When you look at it on paper, you have to give the edge to the Colts just by just a slight edge. So
Flacco started twice for the Colts. He didn't have Taylor in either one of those games.
yeah.
So he's getting Taylor for the first time as a starter.
Receiving game, I'll take this one with TJ Hawkinson back. I think the Vikings have clear advantage in the passing game here. The Colts defense, they are something like 24th in the NFL in pass yards given up per game. When you add the dimension that TJ Hawkinson returning, I think Sam Darnold and the Vikings receivers are going to eat all night long. And if the Colts running game cannot stop Aaron Jones, and you give the Vikings second and short and third and short and open up their whole playbook, they are going to exploit and absolutely embarrass the Colts defense through the air. So I'm giving the edge to the Vikings. Chris.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. I think we've already talked about the Hawkinson return. That's going to open up a lot in the middle of the field. Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson. It says a lot about what we expect for Justin Jefferson that he's currently leading the National Football League in receiving yardage, and it doesn't even feel like he's having a great year to this point. So, but yeah, he's that good. Jordan Addison, after we got the stupidity of alleged trade rumors with him. Yeah, he's going to be ready to go off again here soon. So another part of that, we talked about the Colts offensive line a little bit. Their starting left tackle, Bernard Ryman, is currently still in the concussion protocol. And if he winds up not playing in this game, they're going to be starting a rookie at left tackle. And good luck stopping Jonathan Grenard with a rookie at the left tackle spot. So, yeah, given all that, I mean, the Colts have some solid receivers with Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs, but I don't think they quite match up with the Vikings. So, check mark, Minnesota.
Drew.
When I was researching the Indianapolis Colts, the biggest surprise when they go position to position was the wide receivers. They got some good wide receivers there. Downs and Pittman and Pierce. That Pierce guy is crazy. I mean, his stats every game, he's a serious threat. And when you look at their long ball, they've had some of the most long completion plays of the season, the Colts have. They can stretch the field is what I'm saying, and the Vikings got to be ready for that. But they're no slouch at wide receiver. I'm giving the check mark to the Vikings, but it's slim, and it's mainly because Hawkinson's going to be back. But they're right there. I think they're even at wide receiver, but I think Hawkinson has a big edge over Mo Alley Cox, who No relation to the great Courtney Cox, I don't believe. But,
or Fred Cox.
or Fletcher Cox. Maybe he's a Wally Cox. I do think this. If you're going to let Flacco sit back there like Stafford, I think the Colts have just as good a receivers as the Rams and can kick our ass just as bad. If you're going to let that happen,
I'll give you that.
Yep.
The Colts are not weak at wide receiver. They are very strong at wide receiver. And let me throw this out there for the last time. Why you got to give Addison more passes. You have to get that guy targeted more. Give him some chances, Chris. I mean, come on. He's had 23 targets in 5 games. He had to sit a couple games, but that's not enough. That's barely more than Johnny Mundt. I mean, come on. You got to get Addison more involved. You have to. He's too much talent there.
Hawkinson's going to open things up for him too. So
I hope so, because they're not using Addison enough. And that'll get to my summary with the short passing game. But I still give the Vikings the edge at receiver.
All right, Drew, tell us about the O-line.
This is where the game's going to be made or not made. Let me tell you something. They have 3 guys that are hurting right now. Raymond, who he mentioned, Ryan Kelly, the great center out of Alabama, first-round guy who's a great, great player. If they're down 3 offensive linemen, they got no chance against the Vikings because that's a strong point of their team, probably. When you look at group by group, the offensive line, they have one of the best offensive lines in football. Who has given up the least amount of sacks in the NFL this year?
Indianapolis.
The Colts. They gave up 15 sacks total. 4 weeks ago, they gave up 4 to Jacksonville, lost the game, 0 to Tennessee, 0 to Miami, 5 last week. The season high 5. So that was, between those 2 games, that was 9 of the 15. That's why Houston won the game. They are number 1 in pass protection in terms of sacking the quarterback. They take a lot of pride in it. Houston got home 5 times last week. Will Anderson got 1, and our friend Danielle Hunter got 2. That's pretty much how they won the game against the Colts, but they don't often give up sacks. That's where the game's going to be made. If they start all their linemen, the Vikings got to figure out a way to pressure them so we don't run into the same problem they did with Jared Goff. I'm going to say the Colts are probably going to play all these guys, even though they're banged up and limited practice. Didn't practice today. We record on a Wednesday. None of those 3 guys practiced today. So we'll see how their offensive line pans out. But if they got all the starters in there, they're still, without Darisaw, they still get the check mark on the offensive line.
I kind of agree with Drew here, all things being equal. You know, the Vikings have a lot of stuff that's in flux right now. Obviously, you know, Questenberry or Cam Robinson is going to be your starter at left tackle going into this one. We may or may not have a new starter at right guard. So guys are going to have to make adjustments and whatnot. But yeah, as Drew already pointed out, both their starting tackles and their starting center, none of them practiced on Wednesday. And yeah, Ryman's still in the concussion protocol, and we don't know how those are going to ever work out. So he's really kind of a question mark for this one. They might be able to kind of push on the other 2, but the league's not going to let a dude kind of skip over the concussion protocol to get back out on the field. So all things being equal, if the Colts can get the majority of their starters out there, I think they would get the edge just because of the question marks the Vikings currently have right now, seeing how the line's going to gel with 1 or 2 new starters. But yeah, it's a slight edge, but I would have to give it to Indianapolis.
What you guys said, Colts. Darisaw's out. I mean, it just really hurts the Vikings whole line, even when you put in Cam Robinson, which I agree. I don't think he's going to play this week. All right. Front 7. Chris, start us off. Tell us about Michigan legend Kwity Paye.
I knew it. I knew it.
The Colts have some solid guys up front. We've already mentioned DeForest Buckner. They've got Kwity Paye. They've got Latu, who was the first defensive player drafted this past year, who's had a solid rookie year to this point. I don't think they have quite the horses in the front 7 that the Vikings do, particularly if the Vikings get Blake Cashman back on Sunday. That guy would be a huge addition if he can get back. He didn't practice on Wednesday either, but Kevin O'Connell said that it looked like he was trending in the right direction, so hopefully he can get back out there. But you know, like we said, we touched on Jonathan Grenard already. That guy is looking like a steal to replace Danielle Hunter. You know, Van Ginkel's been great this season. Harrison Phillips has had a solid year. I think the Vikings have the slight advantage along the front 7 if we're comparing one unit to the other.
I think Where this game is largely going to be decided is how the Vikings can handle DeForest Buckner, the great defensive tackle for the Colts. No disrespect to the Colts front seven. They run a traditional 4-3. They're not bad, but if you put them up player for player other than Buckner, maybe I'd take Kwity Paye over Jerry Tillery. But the Vikings front seven has looked pretty good. And I don't know about you guys, but I was ready to call Dallas Turner a complete and utter failure after 7 games because, he hasn't played a whole lot. Thankfully, Brian Flores talked us all down off the ledge on Tuesday and said he came out, or Monday, I think it was, in his press conference, said, look, like I think we've all been saying this. Look, it's playing on a defense with a lot of good players, and it's the reason he's not playing is because there's a lot of talented players ahead of him. So that's kind of the reason. So he's learning, he's doing everything he should be. So calm down. Everybody calm down about Dallas Turner being a bust. He's not.
Yeah.
He's just, there's a lot of talent and a lot of depth in front of him. But yeah, Cashman coming back would be huge for this Vikings defense. I think that's one of the reasons they have looked so discombobulated these last 2 games. But that's just me personally. I'm going to take the Vikings front seven here. Drew?
I am also going to take the Vikings front seven. I think the Vikings have a huge advantage at edge. Kwity Paye and Deo, the other guy, Oda Nangbo. Deo. I mean, we got 3 edge guys with 5 sacks each. I think they're better in the middle, defensive line. Stewart and Buckner, they're very, very, very good internal defensive line players that clog up the middle. I think most of the runs are going to have to go to the perimeter. But what's kind of a surprise is up to this point, the Colts have only blitzed the quarterbacks 15% of the time. The second least amount of blitz time because they've been getting home with their starting 4. They don't blitz a lot. They changed it up last week and blitzed C.J. Stroud 57% of the time. They went from 15% to 57, which is a big jump, and I do not think Houston's offensive coordinator was ready for that. I think he game planned around that, not expecting it, because all of a sudden you go from 15% blitz package to over 50%. It's a big jump. And I think they're going to come at the Vikings that way too. The areas of this game, we'll get into with the summary, are the Vikings being able to pressure Flacco and the front seven of Indianapolis being able to get to Darnold. I think they're better at linebacker than they are at defensive line, but I think if you line up man-to-man, I would give the Vikings the front seven here and an edge.
For the secondary, I'll take this one. The first, 5 games, the secondary is playing lights out. They had given up a lot of yards, but teams were so far behind they had to throw the ball. The last 2 weeks, Stephon Gilmore, Cam Bynum, and I hate to say it, but Harrison Smith have looked day late and a dollar short getting to where they're supposed to be and making plays. They just have. Now, is it because the lack of pressure that the front seven is putting on the quarterback? Because at some point, it doesn't matter how good you are at covering a receiver. If a quarterback has all day to throw, and Matthew Stafford had all day to throw on Thursday, he's going to find an open guy. Against the Lions, the Vikings were putting pressure on Jared Goff, and he was just making some unbelievable throws. So I don't know what it is. But then you look across the field, and you look at the Colts defensive secondary, and they're giving up a ton of yards too. And there's not a lot of names that really stick out to me that are like standout dudes. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I just didn't do my research as well as I should have. But I like the Vikings secondary here, although they've given up more yards than the Colts have. It's not by much. It's close to a push, but in a negative way. The only guy that really has been playing okay so far the last couple of weeks has been Shaq Griffin and Josh Patelis. And I think if the Vikings can get pressure on Joe Flacco, and I think they can, I think this Vikings secondary is going to kind of return to their early season form. So that's why I'm going to pick the Vikings secondary here. Go ahead, Drew.
Vikings get the check mark on the secondary. What's going on with the secondary, guys? I mean, I think Ted is accurate when he says the secondary is because we're not getting enough pressure on the quarterback. I think it correlates. I think we were doing well at the beginning of the season, the first 3 weeks, because we were rushing the hell out of the quarterbacks and they weren't having the time they had. But now that you give a quarterback time, I think Ted's exactly right. The Vikings have to figure out a way, got to get that mixture of blitzing, when to lay back. It just seems like the last 2 weeks they've been a little bit off with that. If you don't step it up this week, Flacco can find targets better than Richardson can. He can find the open guy, and he'll do the same thing Stafford did. He will do the same thing if you let him do it, because they got the receivers to do it. But I think the Vikings secondary, this is a gut check game for them, Ted, Chris. The Rams had 8 plays over 15 yards or more, and a lot of it happened on yak stuff. Throw it to Nakua. He catches it 3 yards downfield and runs for 26. I like the Vikings secondary to bounce back here. because I think they're going to get back to that pass rush stuff. And I'll be quite frank with you, man. The Colts secondary's got a lot of holes in it, Ted. I think the Vikings, if they want to go short to intermediate, they're going to have guys running all over the field. But it depends on if they decide to use them. I think the Vikings got a huge edge in secondary. Even though they haven't played well the last 2 weeks, I got to give them the check mark. The Colts aren't that good in the secondary.
Chris?
Yeah, I got to agree with both of you guys. The Colts secondary is not good. They don't have a lot of players who are, household names or anything like that. Nobody who stands out. Yeah, if the Vikings can find a way to get after Joe Flacco, and like Ted said, they should be able to in this one, that's going to help quite a bit. Josh Metellus is probably the best player in the secondary now, if we're being completely honest with the personnel and how guys have looked over the last couple weeks. And he's someone that could be a key to this one because we know how Brian Flores likes to move him around, put him in different spots, have him do different things. He's kind of now what Harrison Smith was as a younger player, when they could move him around and they could have him blitz, they could have him drop into cover. Metellus is kind of that guy now that Harrison Smith is kind of in his waning years here. So I would have to give the Vikings the secondary check mark because this is going to be a bounce back game for them, I think.
It better be.
Yeah.
All right, Drewster, tell us about the red zone, which, if you don't know, is the area from the 20-yard line into the goal line where teams need to score touchdowns.
Robert W. Farnsworth. I don't know the head coach's name. The Vikings were abysmal in our live telecast against the Rams in the red zone. They were terrible in the red zone, which is why they're what are they, 24th now? This is another gut check. You're playing a team that rarely gets it in the red zone. There's only 4 teams in the NFL that have punted more than the Colts. They have 37 punts on the year. Half of their possessions are punts. So you take the other half, you let them in the red zone. You cannot even let them score. This has to be a bounce-back game for the Vikings. I'm not worried about the offensive red zone. I'm giving them the check mark in the red zone because I think it's an area that needs to be just torn down. It killed us in that Rams game, guys. The red zone killed us in that game. I'm going to give the Vikings a check mark just because they have more weapons down in the red zone.
I am too. Hockenson coming back is a big deal, I think, especially down there. On defense, I like the Vikings' home field advantage, especially on Sunday night. Fans will be able to tailgate and lubricate and libate for about 12 hours before they are let into the stadium, so they'll be loud.
Lubricate
proud.
What?
Libate.
Have I ever libated?
I thought Libate was that concert that Willie Nelson did for the farmers every year.
Oh, no.
That was Live Aid. My bad. I thought it was kind of there's probably some libating going on there too, but
yeah, probably
among other things.
The Colts are like offense are like 19th, defense they're 15th. I like the Vikings' chances to bounce back and play a good game here, as long as they can put Joe Flacco under pressure, which is a song I believe Queen sang at Live Aid back at Wembley Stadium back in 1985. How I brought that around. Bang, Zoom.
Absolutely.
Put that on the board. Championship.
Nerd alert.
Yeah, I like the Vikings here. So take that for what it's worth.
I agree with you guys. The Vikings red zone offense, I mean, they're still 8th in the league in red zone offense. And we've already mentioned having TJ Hockenson back. That's going to change a lot of things in the red zone. Aaron Jones is still an effective red zone runner when he gets the opportunities. So yeah, I think the Vikings have the advantage as far as it goes in the red zone. Like Drew said, the Colts don't get there that often, and when they do get there, you got to stop them from getting more than 3 points. So hopefully this team can pull that off.
All right, coaching. The head coach is Shane Steichen for the Colts, who was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles when they went to Super Bowl 57, I believe it was. He got hired by the Colts. Their offensive coordinator, the one, the only Jim Bob Cooter.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the good friend of Bo and Luke Duke from Dukes of Hazzard way back in the day. Their defensive coordinator is Gus Bradley. If you remember Jim Bob Cooter, he was also the offensive coordinator for the Lions back when the Lions were putrid. So I wish Jim Bob Cooter would go back to Detroit and make that offense suck again, but that's just me. I'm going with KOC. I know the last couple of weeks for the Vikings have not been good. Both KOC and Brian Flores have been outcoached, especially in the Rams game. The Lions game, I thought they pretty much went toe-to-toe. They outcoached Detroit for 2 quarters. They got outcoached for 2 quarters. it was a close game. The first 5 weeks, they were pretty dominant. So I'm going with the Vikings coaching staff in this game. Drew?
Until the Vikings coaching staff picks it up, I'm going to go the other side.
Woo!
Steichen is a great offensive mind.
Woo!
He's got a good background for getting his team ready to play. I think he's doing a great job there in Indy with what he's got. He's got a bust quarterback. The Vikings have stunk it up coach-wise the last 2 weeks. Flores hasn't done a good job, and KOC, my God, you get 2 touchdowns on the first 2 drives. What are you changing it for? What is wrong with you? The Vikings need to prove me wrong on this. I'm going to give the Colts the check mark on the coaching.
All right, that's fair.
The Colts are 4-4, but they're a lot better than that record. They're better than the Rams. They've lost 4 games, Chris, with a total of 14 points. The Colts are no slouch. They're coached well. They've lost a lot of close games, and I think these are good coaches, and they'll have this team ready to play. But Vikings have to show me something. They've been lazy the last couple games. They have.
Chris?
I think that O'Connell and Flores still have the advantage here. I can't trust a dude with 3 names. It's not my rule. It's just a rule that's out there. Their defensive coordinator is also Gus Bradley, who was a terrible head coach for Jacksonville many years ago, if I remember correctly. Like Ted said, the Lions game, the Vikings coaching staff had their good moments, and the Lions coaching staff had their good moments. Both teams kind of balanced things out there. And then the Rams game, they just kind of got whooped on both sides of the ball. I think this is a chance for Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores to both kind of reestablish themselves here, and I think they're going to end up doing that on Sunday night.
All right.
Ted glossed over the special teams, but I'm going to give it to the Vikings.
Oh, I did miss special teams. All right, Chris, tell me about special teams. Go ahead. Yeah. Well, Drew, you talked about it first. I missed that one. Go ahead. Special teams.
Really good special teams. They go with the Vikings. I can't read my original notes. So I'm not allowed to. If you guys let me, I would, but we can't print it. We can't run that.
Do it. Do it.
All right. The Colts have a and their punters. So
yeah, okay, you can't do that. No, we're
Yeah,
gonna
we
cut that. No,
absolutely
that was a
cannot
bad
do that.
idea.
okay,
No.
my uncle
No.
sent me that email saying when you do the thing this week, this is my feeling on it.
Uncle Paulie's take does not get into the
All right,
the
but
show.
don't hold it to me. I'm just passing along what he wanted to do. So
I don't believe you, but okay.
I think I'm giving the Vikings a check mark because will the thrill, man. Vikings get my special teams check mark. Even though, why are they still the worst team in punt return in the league? The worst team in punt return. Get some yardage on punt.
I don't care. I
No,
don't care.
Ted, you should punt. You got to get
like
the areas.
It's like 5
No.
yards. I don't care. I don't care.
Every single area of your football team you
I
can
don't
make
care.
better.
I don't care. I don't care. I don't care about punt return yard. I don't care.
Why don't you care? You could use that to
It's
your
like,
advantage.
it's like 5 yards. It's like 5 yards. I don't care.
I care,
Obviously.
but I'm still giving the Vikings the edge at the special teams.
Go ahead, Chris.
It is still the weirdest sensation ever to have complete and total faith in a Vikings kicker whenever he takes the field. But, Will Reichard, he is, I believe he is still now the only kicker in the NFL who is perfect to this point in the season. Hasn't missed a field goal, hasn't missed the extra point. He's in range basically as soon as he steps out of the locker room. It's nice having a guy like that you can count on. And, Ryan Wright has been decent enough. He's not going to be an all-pro or anything like that. But, I got to give the Vikings the check mark here.
Yeah, Reichard's perfect. Matt Gay is 12 out of 14 from his field goals. The only field goals he's missed is from 50-plus. He's only 1 for 3 from 50 yards or more. Wright's net punt is 42.8. Rigoberto Sanchez is 43.7. Again, punt return yardage. I don't care. I just don't
You gotta
fumble.
care about it.
Just don't fumble when you catch it. Other than that, I don't care. I don't care.
Marcus Sherrill set up a lot of good drives with us with his punt return.
Well,
I'm just saying.
okay. Okay.
You don't care about details because you're a Buckeye fan. They don't care about details.
No,
Fire Ryan Day. I don't care. I don't care.
Punt
All right.
returns friggin' matter, Ted. They matter!
No, they don't. Not anymore. All right. So apologies for skipping over special teams. Now let's go ahead and move to intangibles.
Robert W. Farnsworth here, and I'm on my 4th gin and tonic of the evening. Holy shit, am I wasted!